Robbie Robertson has died aged 80. He, with those remarkable musicians that managed to navigate America from the vagaries or swirling vagaries of psychedelia to something more earthy and rootsy, was hugely influential. Much beloved by Eric Clapton and George Harrison, to name but a few. But of course, as the Hawks were effectively Dylan's backing band in the late 60s, even that infamous Judas gig. But that 1968 album, Music from the Big Pink, was something else, with tracks like The Weight, Chest Fever, Caledonia Mission and To Kingdom Come, songs I believe penned by Robertson. The Weight itself, a song that's been covered by a multitude of artists, including Aretha Franklin. Robbie Robertson told Ultimate Classic Rock in 2019 that the band were all about exploring the music they had inside them, and were not necessarily interested in rock or pop stardom. Robbie Robertson's input was just remarkable. I mean, he also wrote up on Cripple Creek and The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. Of course, he had solo hits with songs like Broken Arrow and Somewhere Down, Crazy River. Robertson really came into his own, if you will, playing with Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks, later became the Hawks, and of course became Dylan's backing band. Although I believe Robertson was fairly tentative at first, initially refusing, I think, Dylan's offer. Of course, Robertson relented and eventually Dylan hired the whole band. I mean, this was when Dylan was a key player in the American folk revival scene. And they were all part of that treachery, of course, when Dylan eventually did plug in. I believe Robertson also plays on Blonde on Blonde. But it's the Basement Tapes, for me, that were a seismic moment in popular music history. Billy Bragg, of course, says with the Basement Tapes, this is the birth of alternative country. And those songs, this loose collection of jamming where they just explore different avenues and dust off these old American standards, that just have an energy and presence about them. Many tracks that would not see an official release until about 1973, if my memory serves me right. Of course, I've got the bootleg series, the entire recordings from that time. It's just wonderful. Interestingly, when Dylan recorded John Wesley Harding, he was thinking about adding some alternative musicians to flesh out the numbers. It was Robertson that heard John Wesley Harding and said, no, you should just leave it exactly as it is. And of course the band reunited with Dylan a little bit later on for the Planet Waves album and of course Before the Flood. Now Dylan had signed to Asylum Records, I think at the best of David Geffen. And of course he was very much about reuniting Dylan with the band for that famous 1974 tour. Of course it's those records that the band actually put out, especially for me, Music from the Big Pink, which is seen as an almost an excavation, a mining of a specific sound that kind of returned to a sense of authenticity. Of course, there are many seismic moments. Of course, Robbie Robertson, the band, are renowned for, more notably, or perhaps more memorably recently, is Martin Scorsese's film The Last Waltz, which is a definite must if you haven't seen it. Robbie Robertson, of course, did play on Ringo's solo album from 1973, but lately I think he mainly seemed to dedicate himself to production work, as well as film soundtracks, even collaborating with Scorsese on Raging Bull, King of Comedy, and of course The Colour of Money. This was music that inspired the Beatles, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, as I've said before. I think with the death of somebody like Robbie Robertson is, as I often say with these videos, it's another marker to denote the fact that this era, this wonderful era for music, is now slipping away from us. We just have to listen to the wonderful music that he made and just content ourselves with that, I guess.